All right, hello again, everyone. This is the third installment on our section on pre-Socratic philosophers. So today we're going to talk about two more um, proposed solutions to the problem of change and the problem of the one and the many. And those are from Heraclitus and Parmenides. Okay, so Heraclitus is yet another pre-Socratic philosopher, and he wants to say um, that when we look at the world around us, right, what we see is constant flux or change, right? Everything is changing. We look out in nature, it's raining, there's erosion, there are creatures that are moving about, the wind carries things away. The world is constantly changing. And so Heraclitus wants to say that all of this change is all that there is, right? So there's a phrase that's attributed to Heraclitus: we never step into the same river twice, right? Okay, so let's imagine a river. There's water that's flowing, right? But at every point in time, the river is changing, right? The water is in a different position. The water that was here 1 second ago is here, another in the next second, right? And so on and so forth until the water reaches the ocean. And so, what Heraclitus wants to say is that, look, the river that's there, when it changes, every time it changes, it becomes a new river. Okay? So, it's not just like the Mississippi River is not just the Mississippi River, right? And we can say that it's the same river, even though it's changing, but rather the Mississippi River is a different river at every moment, right? And so Heraclitus says that everything that is, it works like that. Everything is a new object, a new thing from moment to moment. And because there are so many changes in the world. Okay, and so how can we illustrate this picture of reality, right? So we can think about a river, but we can also think about fire. So Heraclitus talks a lot about fire. So when we have a fire, what is the fire doing, right? The fire's moving, right? The fire's changing. The fire is doing different things from moment to moment. And people have attributed to Heraclitus that fire is the basic substance, right? So kind of like Thales, people have said that Heraclitus thought that fire is the basic element of everything, right? And that may or may not be right, but what is right is that he uses the fire as a metaphor for the constant changing nature of reality, right? So everything that is different from moment to moment. Okay, so what about the nature of change? Um, Heraclitus says that all changes are substantial changes. Okay, well, what is a substantial change? A substantial change is a change that brings about a new substance, right? So, for example, when we go from not having a dog, right, to say having a dog either at birth or conception, right, there's some new thing that's created that didn't exist before. He wants to say all changes are like that, right? So, presumably, when there's a substantial change, uh, whatever it is, either whatever is that's changing is either going away or coming into existence, right? So if I were to substantially change, I would have to die, right? Because then there would be no more Spencer, right? So Heraclitus thinks that all of these changes are substantial changes. And so that's why we can say that you can never step into the same river twice, because it's always going to be a different river. And just you can insert river for anything. You can never read the same book twice. You can never be the same person or meet the same person twice because they're always changing from moment to moment. Okay, and so Heraclitus's solution to the problem of the one and the many is that there is no one, there's only many, right? Everything that exists exists, and it's in constant flux. and it's in things are work in opposites, right? And you're always constantly bouncing back and forth from opposing thing to opposing thing. Okay, so that's a very busy picture of the world, right? And so this view is nicely contrasted with um, Parmenides' view. So Parmenides is actually like the exact opposite of Heraclitus. So Heraclitus, like we saw he thought that everything is constantly changing. In contrast, Parmenides denied the existence of change, right? So when Parmenides looks at the world, right, he sees change. He sees all of the busyness of reality, right? All of the things in nature, right? All the plants growing, all the plants dying, all of these things, right? But rather, he says, look, we need to reject our sensory perceptions, right? And understand that the way reality really works, we have to see with our mind, right? We have to see with the light of reason. And so his the notion here is that, look, it doesn't make sense that the world works in the way Heraclitus thought, right? Rather, he wants to say that there's only one substance, right? There's not a me, there's not a you, there's not a cell phone, there's not a piano, there's not a pen, there's not a mug, right? Rather, all of those things are all just part of the one thing, right? And he calls this one thing being. And so everything that exists or everything that seems to exist is just part of being. And none of it actually changes since it's all part of the same thing. And that thing never ever changes, right? And so as an opposing thing, so this is Parmenides never said this. It's from another book, but we never step into the same river once, right? Because in reality, there is no river, right? That's just part of being. That's part of the one. That all things are a part of, right? So there's no empty space. There's no me. There's no you. We're all just part of being, right? The one. So Parmenides has a solution to the problem of change, right? So recall, problem of change is like, how can we get a new substance from one that didn't previously exist? And how do we lose a substance, like when things die? He says, like, look, there's no changes, so there's no problem, right? So he just denies the existence of change and denies the existence of any substance other than the one, right? And the second, he has a solution to the problem of the one and the many. He says that there is only one substance and denies the many, right? So there are no cell phones, no rivers, no pianos. There's just one thing. And that one thing is the being, or is being itself, right? And that thing never changes. Okay, so we haven't been looking at arguments, but I do want to address an argument, right? So um, don't be afraid of this. So, what is an argument? An argument is a set of premises that logically lead to a conclusion, right? So, when all the premises are together, and if all the premises are true, logically we get the conclusion, right? We can't deny the conclusion unless we deny a premise. So, anyway, this is how an argument is structured. And arguments are meant to give us reasons for thinking that things are true, right? So, previously, we have only been looking at different claims, right? Now we have some reasons to think that a claim is true. So, um, let's start with premise one, right? So, here's the one here. Um, Parmenides wants to say that being is, right, or being exists. Okay, so there is something that exists. Okay, okay, so two, only what can be thought can exist. Okay, the idea here is that, okay, if you can't think it, then that thing doesn't exist, right? Maybe we could question him on that, right? That may not be true. That may be false. Maybe there are things that we've never thought of that do exist somewhere in the universe, right? Um, but before we assess it, let's just assume that that's true. So only what can be thought can exist. Okay. Parmenides wants to say that nothing cannot be thought, right? So imagine, think to yourself real hard, can you think of nothing? No, you can't. Because when you try to imagine nothing, you're imagining something, right? So you can't just think to yourself nothing, right? So we always have to think of something. So that means premise four, which is a conclusion, that nothing does not exist, right? So there's only something, according to Parmenides. Uh, the only viable candidate for something existing besides being is nothing. Okay. So if we have to, so we have to choose between being or non-being, right? It's a dichotomy. Given that we've seen that we can't have non-being, we have to have being. Okay. And therefore, the conclusion is that being is all there is. And so, being here is the idea here is that there's no such thing as distinctness between any objects, right? We're all the same thing. We're all just part of being, part of the one. Okay. And so this is an argument for thinking that there's only one substance that we're all a part of, right? So, if we think that there's nothing, right? If we think nothing is real, then we can say, okay, look, there's empty space between my hands. There's my hand, there's empty space between me and my glass of water, say, and so that means that we're two different substances. But if we say that there's no empty space, if we say that there's no nothing, right? We're all just part of the same thing, according to Parmenides. Okay, so during this lecture, we looked at Heraclitus and his view that the world is in flux and always changing. And we looked at Parmenides and his view that there's nothing that's changing, right? And rather, there's just one substance that never changes. So all of the things that we think we see, it's not real, right? Rather, there's just one being. And then we also looked at this argument for Parmenides' view. So anyway, email me if you have questions. Let me know if there's anything that I can do to help you. I know this stuff is like really confusing, but I think that it will get a little bit easier.